Continuing his self-interrogation, he says, was it that his gods had left him? Was he left with no source of inspiration? Again, at this juncture, we understand what the poet meant by saying that he followed the wrong gods from the start. He had the wrong sources of stimulation. By peddling his bicycle glasses, the poet implies the progress of his vision. Just as a bicycler pedals to move forward, the poet pedals to move his vision forward. After a rough passage in which he has been shunting between expectations and disappointments, the speaker settles down and gives a thumbnail sketch of his life and career in this poem. He casts off his former self, full of aspirations and desires, liberties, and liberates himself from the burden of his past. So far, he has been wearing academic glasses and having idealistic pretensions. His life is reduced to a ritual of rehearsed responses lacking involvement. In a fit of self-criticism, he declares that he has no talent for poetry. He repents for being a critic, and he says that he had no talent for poetry and now he has become a critic. So he is like a parasite now and he is not happy with his present profession. As one goes through the poem, one can discern a distinction between I and the he. The I and the he. The I stands for the current role of the speaker in the present tense, that of a critic. He is a critic now and he is thinking about his past profession as a poet. The he shows the speaker in a mode of a transition from the poet to the critic. Earlier he was a poet, now he has become a critic and he is not satisfied with his present profession. The answer to the question, what's like to be a poet, is answered by the speaker in no uncertain terms. He first goes on to reprimand himself as a critic. In an act of vituperation, Parthasarathi terms the critic as the son of a bitch who fattens himself on the flesh of the dead poets. To be more precise, the critic is a parasite who depends directly on the poet. Therefore, the critic who takes himself to be his eminence has no significance. But for the poet, in castigating terms, the critic is likened to a fly that feeds on the dung heap of old texts and obscure commentaries. Where would the so-called critic be if it was not for the poet that splashed about the Hellesponds or burnt about the Java Sea? This is the direct allusion to the classical poets, the Greek poets, and the modern poets also. The poem thus drives home the significance Parthasarathi imparted to the poet. The profession of a poet is more dignified according to the poet, to Parthasarathi. Homecoming reads like a dialogue between the protagonist's actual self and his idealistic self. The protagonist unveils his self, which he has been practicing and deception and falsehood. He subjects himself to severe self-examination as a man and as a poet. So one thing is clear after reading this poem, that he is not satisfied with his present profession as a critic, and he thinks that the critic is like a parasite who feeds upon other creatures, who sucks blood from others. So a critic, evaluates the works of other poets. Do you know the role of a critic? You must have read commentaries of the film critics, film reviewers. In the same manner, literary critics are those who review the works written by others, who review some poets' works, some dramatists' works, some historians, some novelists' work. So the role of the critic is only evolution. They don't write, they don't create. They only evaluate other people's works, literary works. So the poet, Mr. Parthasarathi says that since he did not have that inspiration which a poet needs, he tried the profession of creating something. He wanted to become a poet in the beginning, but he felt that inspiration did not dawn upon him, and he felt that writing something, creating something was beyond him. So he adopted another profession, the profession of a critic. He started evaluating other people's works. But later on, he felt that he was not made for this kind of profession. He was not happy with this kind of profession, criticism, being a critic, because he felt that he had not created anything. He simply reviewed other people's works, evaluated other people's works. No first-hand creation. So again, he is dissatisfied. I hope you have understood the poem, the theme of the poem, the disappointment of the poet, the sorrow of the poet, the discontent of the poet, the unhappiness, the thirst, the hunger of the poet for more creative things. He wanted to write something, but he could not. When he came to India, he felt himself misfit because it was the India which he left was different from the India where he has come back. So he is in the middle. He has become a rootless person as far as the society is concerned, the culture is concerned, the country is concerned, the language is concerned, and he is rootless in the literary field also. He belongs to nowhere. He wanted to become a poet. He failed. He wants to he wanted to become a good critic, but he is now dissatisfied with this profession also. So he is in the middle, hanging. He has become rootless. Okay, I think I have done my best in order to explain you the meaning, the theme, the message of the poem. And I hope you have followed it, you have understood the meanings, you have enjoyed the poem, and I hope you will study it from a different perspective now. Thank you for being with me, and we will meet tomorrow in a different, I will discuss Agea's poem Hiroshima tomorrow, and I think you will enjoy that lecture also. Be prepared for that. Thank you very much.